Thank you for the opening, Mutsumi. I appreciate it, and it's wonderful to be back here talking to this group again. I've had the opportunity to meet with some of you over the course of the year. There's some very exciting projects and initiatives that are underway that I think are going to have a very positive impact, on our industry. And I'm looking forward to see some of the ideas, inventions, and concepts, coming to life and ultimately coming to market. Which actually brings me to the conversation that Marty and I are going to speak of today, which is attracting investment. Many projects are now getting to a phase where further funding is required, whether it's for clinical trials or even to start thinking about commercialization. That's a phase that some of these projects are in. And so I'm going to walk through for you a conversation about tracking, preparing for investor meetings. And then Marty is going to take some time to dive a little bit deeper as to how some of those meetings may go and what some of the content is and conversation that you may have with some of those investors. So Mutsumi shared my background. I've been in the healthcare industry my entire career. Most recently working in the dentistry, but also significant experience in the pharmaceutical medical device industries in both Europe and the US. I've worked and I'm familiar with business models and regulatory models in the US and Europe, to some degree Asia, but I've lived on both continents and have experienced these things firsthand. My core expertise is commercialization. It's about bringing products, out of the lab to market and making them, successful and productive. And so I'll share with you, in my conversations, perspectives that I have, and hopefully you'll learn something. As you go through the investment phase, particularly where you are right now, there are really, four major events or four, phases of meetings that you're going to go through. The first is going to be the initial communication, which is, how are you going to attract investors? These are the initial conversations where you're talking to investors and trying to raise, money from them, but also raise, the awareness of what it is you're doing. If all is successful there, you will move to an evaluation phase where the investor is going to look more deeply at what you have to offer. Then moving to a diligence phase, where they're going to look very, very deeply to understand what it is they're going to be buying into and what their exit strategy will be. And then finally getting to negotiating terms. You may wind up talking to 10, 20, 50 people on the initial communication to wind up with only one person in the end when you're negotiating terms. You only need one person, and something to think about, as you're starting to work and raise capital is, who the right targets might be, but you only need one. Start with one investor, and that ultimately can help you get to other investors. Investors know investors. And so when you run into an opportunity, second phases of funding, second series, investors can often help you find those people. Attracting investment in the initial meeting, this is where a lot of conversations shut down very quickly, because when you're talking to an investor, you have to realize that they're commercial people. They're not always scientists, and they're looking at many, many ideas every day, every week. Their expectations are that you will present with something that is clear, concise. It'll be a description of your product, your technology, and the benefit. They're looking for something that says this product is going to win because it's solving a problem. You need to be able to articulate the problem that you're solving for the clinician or the patient, and you need to give an indication of how you will generate revenue. And this should be something that you deliver very clearly up front. And when you think about your presentation, you want this to be in commercial language, and you want to get all of this really on slide one. If you cannot capture the investor's attention with your early initial description of product, technology, and benefit, you're really not going to be able to move further on. So having that very, very strong initial pitch is critically important to retaining their attention for further conversation. Investors look for focus. Uh, they may not know technologies, they may not know categories, but so they tend to look at how inventors behave and what it is they're trying to build. And what's very important to them is focus. And so when you are presenting your technology to them, it's important to when you're you know to when you're developing your investor target list, the focus helps because you are able to identify where it is you want to go and people who may be interested in supporting your technology and bringing your product to market. While it's great to have a lot of different applications for your product, and it's great to say that the technology can be expanded and developed in multiple ways, quite honestly, that's great conversation for down the road. But early on, an investor wants to know, how are you going to use this technology? What product are you going to create? And are you staying focused on that? Because they want to get to the point of monetization. And so they're looking for focus, and they're looking for organizations and inventors that can describe how the technology is going to be used in a reasonable product application that has the best opportunity for coming to market. And they want to know that you know your target market, and that you're very clear about who your target market is, and you're being specific about that. Saying that you have a great product for dentistry is not enough. You need to be very specific within all of these different segments of dentistry, and even procedures within the different segments of dentistry. And so you're going to be evaluated on focus and whether or not you can stick with that focus. If you are involved in a conversation and you present your technology as something that is so broad and can be applied in a lot of ways, while investors are interested in hearing that, they don't know how to act on it. And they certainly aren't going to fund too many initiatives, at one time. They really want to see success. And so focus and continuity, focus of the presentation on terms of target market, and continuing that through everything that you talk about with the investor is very, very important, very, very critical. How are they looking at you? And what is it that they're looking for in when they're looking at putting money on the table? Candidly, quality of management is critically important. They want to know that whoever it is they're investing in is going to be able to turn around and develop the business and give them a nice return on their investment. They're looking for management expertise. They're looking for industry expertise. And they're looking for a management team that is credible, a management team that works well together and is aligned, and a team that has the ability to execute. It doesn't need to be a large team. It could be a small team. It could be 2 or 3 people. It could be maybe 5 people. But they're looking for tremendous alignment among the different team members, that the team members all share a common vision and are focused on the same execution plan without any debate or conflict among the team. The industry expertise is obviously important because knowing the industry or the subsegments of the industry helps in terms of commercializing a product. And then management expertise is a discipline of essentially managing something through the commercialization phases and getting it to market. And this is often more important than the product itself. And investors often are evaluating the management team at the very, very, in the very, very early meetings. They're forming assessments and opinions as to whether or not the people whom they are talking to can bring something to market, can get it done to a point of commercialization. The second thing that they're very interested in learning about is the product opportunity. How competitive is this space that you are entering? How big is the market opportunity? And who else has a strategic interest in this space? So it's not only competition, but what companies, what other inventors, would be interested in this space strategically, because that becomes part of the exit plan. Investors are thinking about exit plans early on, and when a product comes to market or the product is developed, they want to know, who could be a potential acquirer of that technology or product, or who is going to be the customer, the specific customer that is going to purchase that product. So in the initial investor valuations, there's a lot of thought about the quality of management. That is probably more important, honestly, than the product itself, because the products don't always sell themselves and bring themselves to market. You need to have a strong team to do that. But they're going to look at the space, and they want to know that they're going to have some room to take market share, or gain a piece of the market, and they're going to assess how competitive it is and how big the opportunity is that you represent. If you get that far in the process, you'll start to get into a diligence conversation. And this may be in separate meetings where they will, the investor will come in, they may come in with their representatives or other colleagues, and there'll be a healthy diligence conversation. And this will depend upon where you are in your development phase. But one of the things that they're clearly going to ask about is, what is the regulatory strategy? They will want to know that you have a regulatory strategy. You may not have a regulatory approval, but they want to know that you know how to go get that. They are not going to be able to tell you how to handle your regulatory bodies. So being prepared in these diligence conversations with results of early FDA meetings, where you've talked with FDA about how you would structure clinical evaluation or clinical trial is very important. Having an execution plan for your clinical investigation, working with clinical investigators to develop that execution plan up front builds confidence in with the investor that you know how to bring this product through the regulatory process. And then obviously feedback from leading clinicians. These are people who are going to validate the concept, who hopefully you worked alongside during development. They can bring a clear perspective to the conversation about the validity of the product and how it will work, in terms of treating patients and why it will be attractive to clinicians. And also they'll be able to validate to some degree whether or not your regulatory strategy is on target. Other thing they're going to be interested in learning about is commercial model. And I'll be honest with you, there are many, many people whom I talk to who bring forward great products, great ideas, who they'll have no insight on what to do with the product commercially. And they often think, let me license my product to a big dental company, and the big dental company will figure out the commercial model. Even a big dental company is interested in understanding what you as an inventor would think of the commercial model. How will we convert customers to this new product? This is something you're hopefully learning as you're developing your product and your technology, but customer conversion is critical for all of us to understand. It's the basis of buying or licensing any product. Sourcing and cost. How are we going to manufacture this? Is the manufacturing this product going to be prohibitively expensive, or is it going to be very complicated? What type of environments are needed to manufacture this product? How can the manufacturing be scaled? And then the last thing is data that is used, whether it's market research data or forecasts you're creating. You need to be able to back that up. Hopefully you'll have the opportunity to do some market research. It's very expensive, but you'd like to be able to do some market research with clinicians or the target market, so that you can be able to quantify what this product will represent, and you'll have some clear, solid information that endorses what you've created. And as a team, it's important that you all know what is in scope and what is out of scope as you're doing the diligence preparation. And as the conversation moves to regulatory strategy and commercial model, it's very important for the team to know this is what we're trying to accomplish with our regulatory strategy. This is what we want as an approval. We are looking to achieve a certain type of label or indication, from FDA or the regulatory bodies, and you want to be aligned on that. You all want to be able to describe the same way, and you need to be able to say what is out of scope, all right, what you're leaving on the table, or you're leaving behind. This demonstrates the strength of the team and inspires confidence with the potential investor in that they will know that the team knows what the limits are and will stay on track to achieve the targeted result. When you get to that point, if there's strong interest, you'll find that you'll get to a conversation about negotiating terms. And negotiating terms is going to vary depending upon whom you are working with. If you're early stage and you are taking funding from angel investors or smaller amounts, excuse me. If you talk with angel investors who are taking funding in smaller amounts, the terms will be a little more flexible because everyone at that point in time is just trying to create funding that gets to maybe establishing a proof of concept and keeping the idea and the concept alive. As you start to talk with the experienced investors, you will find they are less flexible and they start to have more interest in commercialization. They have more interest in governance. They want to know how their larger investment is going to be managed and what types of governance are in place around the organization. And even though they may not be able to buy a controlling interest, they still want to know how everything is going to be managed. And they will sometimes ask that their investment be protected. They will not want to be diluted. And this is often a point of negotiation with experienced investors. And then as you move to higher levels, venture capital firms, corporate sponsors, they tend to be the most sophisticated. They have models that they work with. They tend to be less flexible. Particularly corporate sponsors, they have a very clear idea of if they're going to invest in something, what type of terms they're expecting, what type of return they want, and they will. They're willing to negotiate around some of those smaller pieces, but they're not willing to negotiate large pieces of equity and be very flexible around that. And you will find that those conversations that they have, they tend to repeat. If you work with one or two corporate sponsors, you'll see that there's a lot of repetition or similarity in how they do things. But the great news about working with some of these investors is they're always willing to invest in future rounds. And so they don't jump in and think, well, I'm going to come in this round and put some money in. They're usually looking at something, being fully aware that they'll be expected to invest in future rounds. And so while these conversations may be difficult, you often wind up with an investor or a sponsor who is willing to stay with you, for a longer period of time. So just thought I'd share with you some recent successes and failures that I've seen over the past 3, 4, 5 months of companies that maybe in some of the areas that you folks are all working, and just give you a little bit of perspective as to how these deals have worked or potentially or how they've failed. And then after this, I will move the presentation on to Marty. So. Recently, there's a wonderful orthodontic company that had a great business model and really strong commercialization plan. But as they were going through their negotiation with investors, it really fell apart over governance. The founders really wanted to maintain a very, very strong amount of control over the company going forward, and were not willing to let the investors have what they felt was adequate control, and they wound up losing their investor, and they are now back at the starting line trying to recruit new investors, having learned a very, very difficult lesson that investors are just not going to get their money without any expectation over governance and some control and influence. Worked with an MRI technology company recently that has a very interesting MRI technology, which would be wonderful in helping to diagnose different dental diseases and oral care issues. The challenge that this company had was they were meeting with investors. Their target market was very unclear. They saw their technology being used in a number of ways, and in all the investor conversations, they were very easily led in different directions by saying our product, it can solve that issue, it can solve another issue, it can solve a third issue. Yes, we could do that. And while all those things were exciting to hear, the investors felt that they lacked focus, that this company just was not picking one area to go after and focus on. On a positive side, there's a neurologic therapy company, interesting company that's had a huge win with a single investor. This is someone, the single investor has an affinity and deep understanding of the disease state that this company is focused on. It has a really good management team. Actually, some people from the dental industry are involved in this company. And they've been able to successfully raise capital with a single investor who has been able to bring in some other smaller level investors. And they've been able to get this company up and running quite successfully. And then a fourth is a regenerative company that actually was very successful in raising quite a bit of capital through crowdfunding. They have great product. It's an ease of use product. And when they were looking to raise money for some of their clinical trials, they actually went to the dentist community and found 100 dentists who were willing to put significant investment in. I mean, $10,000 or so. And they each wound up with shares in the company. A little difficult to deal with on the exit because there are so many shareholders, but it was a great way of raising small amounts of capital from a large size group that was able to get the company to where it was going and to where it needed to be. And it wound up becoming a very successful company. So there are some interesting models for people out there to access in terms of raising capital. It doesn't always have to be a venture capitalist, or a university or a government agency. You can find some other creative ways of raising capital. But I would say that almost any investor, though, is going to take a look at a product opportunity in business and go through those 4 phases that we just talked about, in the preceding slides. So with that, we'll have opportunity for questions after the next presentation. And Marty, I will turn it over to you. So Mutsumi, I'll bring my slide down.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. Hey, Gene. Thanks. That was great. Very. I even found it interesting. It was wonderful. So a great roadmap for all the groups in structuring an appropriate investment presentation. Let me go ahead now, and I'm going to share my screen, which I think should work. And let's go right to.
Go.
Let's see if we can get it to that. There we go. Okay. And it's a pleasure to talk to the group. I mean, I've had a chance to, unfortunately, in the world we live in, we haven't had an opportunity to all be in the same room and get to know each other a bit, which I think would be a real wonderful opportunity. But I did have the opportunity to review all of the one-page descriptions of what you've done. And as a dental industry guy, it's always great to see the kind of really grassroots research that's being done and the very bright people that are trying to solve some of the challenges that dentists are creating today. And I think what is critical is, and throughout my career, I've seen all kinds of incredibly interesting ideas. I do tend to be an optimist. I tend to look at these embryonic ideas and product concepts and see futures and potential in them. But the real struggle is, much as Gene so eloquently talked about, how do we go ahead and create the appropriate presentation so that those ideas, concepts are able to be commercial, reach the market, and at the end of the day, do what all of you are intending to do, which is improve the overall quality of dental care and the patient experience. So again, thanks to all of you for having me here, and congratulations on all of your efforts, and for all the potential. The critical aspect now is, how do you secure the funds needed to achieve the success that you all anticipate? And I'm going to come at this a little different than Gene. I'm going to try to talk more about some of the themes and the philosophies and the concepts that need to be baked into the presentation. I trust that all of you understand all the technical aspects. You've probably had plenty of opportunity to explain those technical aspects to various groups and colleagues over time. And repeating that story over and over will help you focus and begin to understand exactly what the benefits are. But I'll try to lend you some of my experience and some of the things that I've seen over my 35-year career. I'm a dental guy. That's pretty much all I've ever done. That sometimes I explain that to people, and they kind of look at me a little odd. You don't exactly go to college with the goal of graduating to be a dental guy, but this has been a great experience. I can't say enough about how wonderful the dental industry has been. And I'm a sales and marketing guy, and I will be trying to help you understand some of the sales and marketing aspects of your presentation, so that you can move your hope streams, concepts, and products forward to get to, I trust, where you all would like to be. And I guess the one critical aspect that should be a cornerstone of your presentation and how you think about it and how you structure it. And it's best that you start this right at the beginning, because it'll be a critical aspect of all interface you have with potential investors going forward, is manage expectations and define expectations and goals very clearly right from the beginning. What do you want to be when you grow up? What is the exit strategy? What is your definition of success? And how you're going to get there, what the exit strategy is. I believe you want to look at where you hope to be and then work your way back so that the story holds together and tells a very compelling story throughout the entire process that you're going to go through. And fundraising presentations, I believe, tell a story. They need to be all the things that Gene just said, but the best type of presentation is one that tells a compelling story that the investor becomes interested in, that he can understand what you've been through, where you're going, and what the ultimate benefit is. And the more compelling that story is, of course, the more likely you're going to succeed. And you want to get comfortable with that story. You want to understand what the expectations are going to be, what the goals are going to be, so that this becomes embedded in your DNA, because you're going to be making that pitch and telling that story hundreds and hundreds of times as you go through the life cycle of your business. So I just can't emphasize enough that managing expectations and having a very realistic understanding of where you wish to be is critical, the cornerstone to everything that goes forward. And then again, much like Gene talked about with the structure of management, but you need, and your startup team needs to understand, what is going to be your role? What are you comfortable with? What purpose are you going to play in making this, taking this story to its endpoint? And what skills do you have that can lend accretive value to the entire process? And that's where you have to be very objective. You have to be very critical of your own skills. Excitement, energy, passion, they're all wonderful. That's what's gotten you to this point, and that's going to be a huge part of where you get in the future. But truly, they're not enough. They're not what an investor's looking for. And then the more critical question that you really need to ask, because if you ask it early, you can have a much greater likelihood of success, but will you be around to see success? And the decisions you make now about how you structure that team will play a significant role. In my role at various dental companies, I've seen many, many different opportunities cross my desk where they were now 3, 4, 5, 6 years after the initial investment. And in fact, the founder, the inventor, all those people were long gone because they weren't able to effectively transition into new roles. And at this point, someone had come in as an investor, bought up whatever was left of the business, and we're now remarketing. And oftentimes great ideas. They had great potential. Very valid opportunities, but the original team was no longer around because they weren't able to define their role early in the process. And critical to all the discussions with investors, because it's going to be something that you'll talk about and talk about and talk about again, is how much money are you going to need? How much money is it going to take to get from where you are today and move the company to where you want to be, to get through the development stages, the commercialization stages, and to some exit strategy? And as much as you'll work the numbers, you'll work the forecast, you'll work the projections, it's always going to take more time and more money than anticipated. And why that is, I mean, I'm sure there's a whole host of reasons why that people have talked about, but just accept that, and you'll define that destination, but it's incredibly hard to estimate how long it will take you to get there. And inevitably, the longer it takes, the more money it costs. And we're focusing on the dental market here, but in truth, anybody marketing a new, innovative, disruptive product is targeting successful people. I haven't seen too many business plans where people say, hey, we're going to target unsuccessful people and people who are failures and people that don't know how to get things done. You're targeting successful dentists, and you're going to be targeting them because they do wonderful work. They've got great clinical skill, but all that said means that they're extremely busy. And oftentimes their challenges are not clinical. They're successful. They're doing wonderful things right now. They have figured out how to solve most of their clinical problems. So their concerns may be staffing, overhead, financial issues within the practice, but they might not be thinking about your particular product or solution. Consequently, it's going to be hard and take longer to cut through all of those issues to get in front of the potential customer and convince them that your solution is going to be an improvement over what they're already doing. The if it ain't broke, don't fix it mentality and the entrenched nature of existing products always work hard and work aggressively against the introduction and the launch of new innovative ideas. Changing dental behavior, for that matter, changing any behavior, is expensive and time consuming, and I would add more expensive and time consuming than you're usually able to go ahead and estimate early on in the process. So take that into account, because so much of the credibility of your presentation is going to be on an investor looking at it and saying, I believe in this, it's correct, what you're asking for is reasonable. And early stage investors, what everyone hates is dilution. They put money in at a certain point, they get a certain percentage of the business at that point. They don't want to find out 6 months, a year and a half later that now you have to go out and raise more funds. You've exceeded the initial investment. It's taken more time, it's taken more money, and now they're experiencing dilution. And believe me, I can speak firsthand to talking to a room full of less than happy investors, letting them know that you now have to go out and raise an additional millions of dollars when they were all promised that by this stage there would be a liquidity event and there wouldn't be any further dilution. So it's a critical aspect to consider in your presentation. And in addition, so often as to the why it does take more time and money, we often are so close to these concepts and we have such a passionate belief in their ability to change the way care is delivered and change the patient experience that we believe that there's a standard of care, a paradigm shift that's going to happen that will redefine a standard of care due to the research and the technical strength of our innovation. And standard of care, especially in the dental area, is extremely difficult to define. It's often unique to each solo practitioner in practice. It addresses their skill set and isn't necessarily dictated by the product or some outside entity. It's very hard to define. And it's oftentimes easier if you're in large environments, if there's reimbursement involved. Large clinics can go ahead and develop more internalized standards of care, but to rely upon a standard of care to assist you in delivering or in changing behavior, developing a market for your product, I think is a mistake that is often made, at least in a lot of the plans and the presentations that I've seen, because it's amorphous. It's a lot harder to define than I think a lot of people think. And then again, we're talking to successful people. I've always found the key factors that contribute to a dental medical product success, clinical success, Number one is the skill of the dentist or doctor, a highly skilled, successful medical practitioner, dental practitioner can make a lot of different products work and work successfully and have very happy, satisfied patients. The physiology of the patient plays a huge role in success of products also, and obviously that's unique to every patient. And finally, that third characteristic that assists in the successful outcome is the product, because the other two are often more critical, and you have to put that into the process also to understand that silver bullets are extremely rare. I guess they do happen from time to time, but it's very, very difficult to have a truly an honest, real live silver bullet. It just doesn't happen. So do try to fully understand what factors can realistically help increase the speed of adoption of your product and how to best use and most importantly fund them. Because again, if you're not understanding them fully and it does end up taking more money because you don't know how to use this particular tool, that's going to come back and have negative consequences as you go out and have to raise more funds. And Gene touched on this briefly too with respect to data and projections. Dental data and to some extent data in general, I think always needs to be treated cautiously and as suspect. A whole lot of people out there are doing market research. Their goal is to sell data. Their goal is to assist people in understanding markets and circumstances. But oftentimes it's very hard to rely on that data for commercialization purposes. Having been in numerous roles in large dental companies and having purchased a lot of dental research data over the years, I can honestly say I haven't found much of it to be of great value. And when obviously your company is included in that data and they're positioning your company, they're defining market sizes, and you have an intimate knowledge of your own data, and you know that their data is off by sometimes 25, 35, 40, 50%, it just makes it very hard to have confidence in the market research and some of the prices that people want to charge for it. And that said, then where do you go for data? And I think it's a matter of taking 2 or 3 or 4 different data points and just trying to blend them in a way so that you get some sense and some validation between the different sources, to the point that you begin to have a better understanding of exactly what the reality is by comparing different data sets to one another. Unfortunately, one of the fallbacks, understanding that buying market research data is expensive, is to go out and survey dentists, survey colleagues, survey people you work with that are experienced in some of the clinical aspects that you're looking to approach. But unfortunately, from my experience, dentists, doctors, they know the right answer. They're very experienced and well trained. A lot of patient interaction, just in general. When they're asked questions, they know what the right answer is. Consequently, what you really want is you don't want the right answer. You want an answer that's going to accurately define what they're doing. And the right answer is oftentimes at odds with the accurate answer as well, especially when it comes to defining the number of procedures, the number of patients they see with a certain condition, and the amount of practice activity. For the most part, dentists are cognizant of that day, that week, but once you get beyond a very limited time frame and ask them to extrapolate, it becomes very, very difficult for them to do that with any accuracy. So you really need to go through your data and your projections and ensure that you're looking at them from as many different perspectives as possible. Start top down and evaluate it, then start again from the bottom up and see if that makes sense too, based on really a granular understanding of knowledge, and then make sure the projections hold up. Because again, if the projections aren't accurate, it's going to take longer to get there, it's going to take more money, and it's going to upset your investing strategy. In addition, you want to clearly understand and be able to articulate a sustainable competitive advantage. And each one of these items on this list, the more you can take care of those and complete these tasks with the initial early stage funding, the more valuable the company will be, and the less dilution you'll have to experience over time as you bring additional investors. So if that early stage funds can be used to file patents and secure patents and begin building proprietary knowledge. If you're able to get regulatory clearance, be it FDA, be it if it's a PMA, a 510K, whatever it might be, if you can fund that with early stage funding before significant dilution has occurred, all of these points put you in a stronger negotiating position as you begin to work your way through the various levels of investment. And the more you can get done in the early stages, don't spend the money on the office or in hiring people that you don't really need at that point in time. Focus on the critical value drivers that will establish a valuable, sustainable competitive advantage that you can then articulate clearly in your presentation, and it will go a long way towards maintaining the value of the company and not being overly diluted as you go through future rounds of financing. Sources of funding. I'm a big believer in the early stages, be it, crowdfunding is certainly a newer way of raising funds, but, it's sort of an extension of a family, friends, dental colleagues approach. And I think that's an incredibly valuable source of early stage funding. Dental investors, much as Gene mentioned, offer a lot of credibility early stage. This is a group that tends to be a little, less sophisticated. You don't have to endure quite the degree of dilution you might through other rounds. You're more in control of the terms that you're offering, and it can be a group that you can go back to in the future. Again, if in fact your initial investors feel good about the way you've managed it, if you've got great transparency, if they see that the funds are being used in an appropriate way, and you're seeing the kind of growth and success that you had communicated to them early on. I think friends and family can be a powerful early stage that prevents some of the real significant dilution. That said, when you step up that notch to venture capital, now you're playing with the big boys. You got to bring the A game. You got to have your presentation well understood, your diligence prepared. These are guys that really know the financial aspects of investing, and that is going to be a big part of how they approach you. In addition, you want to make sure that you fully understand the groups you're going to, what have they invested in before, what similarities, and try to tailor presentations to their strengths and their familiarity. Because again, there are very few dental specific VCs out there. Consequently, you typically have to find some way to draw a connection to something they may have invested in out of dental in the past, and then be able to bring that over to dental. Oftentimes, when you get to this level and you start talking about terms, VCs want to basically own the company. They want to be in charge. They want to be in control. And that creates issues, much like Gene mentioned, where the orthodontic company couldn't get a governance issue satisfied. And just remember, 10% of something is better than 100% of nothing. And that message is oftentimes very difficult for founders, inventors, and early stage members of your team to understand. But if you've got 100% of a business which has no value because you haven't been able to let control and get comfortable with that, let go of control and get comfortable with that, it still is 100% of nothing. You have nothing to show for your efforts. Angel investors are, if you can find the right one, and I know people do all the time, I think they're wonderful. I sort of look at that as they can be complicated. They can create issues in going forward with future investing, primarily because they're fairly unsophisticated, but they want the same types of terms as a more sophisticated investor, as a VC investor might want. And yet most times angel investors may have had one or two successes in their career. They do have some money to invest. They don't bring a lot of broad investing experience, and they may not be prepared to give follow-on investing. So you've brought in angel money. Angel money has created a very unique set of terms. Those terms now become so difficult for a follow-on investor to get involved with that it's unattractive for them. I find angels to be a difficult source of investing to appropriately manage. Again, if you find the right person, a little bit of a needle in a haystack situation, they can be okay. But I think it's always best to have some understanding of the angel group you're going to and some prior personal relationship. And then finally, dental companies. I believe even if you're not going to be funded by a dental company, you should start talking to dental companies fairly early on, because they can be a great source of feedback. They can help validate data. They can ask questions that'll make you think differently about how the presentation is being structured, because they're dental companies. This is what they do. It's their world. They're in it every day, and they have a much broader perspective of what's happening in the market than you would in your niche, in your area of expertise. So again, whether they participate or not is almost secondary to the kind of input and insight that you can get from them. And should things work out well, you get two dental companies interested in the product, and you now have that wonderful event called an auction. And at that point in time, things can get very, very positive for your concept product idea. But it's, I think, great to talk to them throughout the process, continually go back to dental companies and keep them updated as to your progress. I'm sure all of you have relationships with different companies, but to pick their brain and to get some of their insight can go a long way to improving the substance and the overall credibility of your presentation. And there's many ways to structure a deal with a dental company. Believe me, it covers the whole gamut. And all of those can work out very well, because again, they own the sales and marketing channels, which is by far the most expensive aspect of commercializing a product. And if you think your own you can build that on your own, I think that's going to be a mistake for you to go down that route. It's extremely expensive. So in summary, again, I can't mention enough about managing expectations right from the beginning, and continuing along the way to go back and reassess those expectations and how you communicate those expectations to current investors, future investors, et cetera. Build a patient overfunded model. Just make sure that it all holds together, that there's enough money, that it's well defined and can be communicated, and then go back and just review it again. You can't do that enough to ensure that there's a credible story that current and future investors can look back on and say, hey, you guys know what you're doing. You've got a handle on this. You're running the business or projecting this business in a very competent way. Vet your data, and then vet your data again. Just keep going back to the data, because so much of what you're estimating that future potential on, an exit strategy, all of that is based upon data at some point in time through the presentation. And just as much as you possibly can, try to make sure that it's accurate data. Tell a compelling, engaging story. I often found times with presentations, I talk to people, I talk to family members, I talk to people that really didn't have any interest in investing in the opportunity, just to see if they liked the story. Was the story interesting? Was it something that people could empathize with and see some engagement with? It's really not a bad thing at all to do. Tailor the presentation to your audience. If you're presenting to a dental company, that might be a different presentation than if you're going to a friends and family, different than a VC. Each one of those audiences is going to be different. And if you can find out, especially with VCs, prior investment, prior involvement, and tailor it to some earlier opportunity, hopefully successful opportunity they had, that goes a long way also. And then, how is your product concept accretive to the potential investor, especially if you're talking to dental companies? How does this product fit in within their existing portfolio and make that portfolio better? How does it accentuate or increase the overall value of the current products they already sell? How can your product be a driver of business for other parts of that product portfolio? And then it's funny, I gave this presentation to Francine Berkey, and she looked at WIFM and said, what's that? And it's an expression from a sales and marketing concept that we talk about. It's what's in it for me. And it's part of that process of WIFM is something you always need to be concerned about, because obviously you're very engaged with your product, you're very energetic about it, but what's in it for the person you're speaking to, and how well can you articulate that so that they're comfortable with investing in this opportunity, and they're going to see that highly accretive return in the future, the 4, 5, 6x multiple that they're looking for, and make sure that that's very clearly articulated and spelled out. And much like Gene said, expect repetitive silence after presentations. I mean, people oftentimes don't don't even tell you no. They just don't respond. And the no is really as rare as a yes. And just get used to the fact that you're going to be talking to lots and lots of people about investing. And oftentimes you're not going to get much feedback from them at all. You'll just have to move on to the next and the next until you get that very rare yes. And I'll finish on one quick story. A number of years ago, when I was still president of Stereos, we were in the process of funding a management buyout. We were a subsidiary at that time of Bausch and Lomb. And I was in front of a private equity guy. We had an extremely successful business growing 15, 20% per year, great bottom line, experienced management team. Chairman of the board was ex-CEO of SmithKline Beecham. Another board member was the ex-president of 3M Dental. We had all the boxes filled. And part of my presentation was talking about the great potential of dental implants and how minimal of the market had been penetrated and how much runway was left. And at that point in time, I think we estimated that about 2% of all edentulous areas were being replaced. Edentulous patients were receiving implant care. 98% of the market was left to address. And the guy I was presenting to asked how long implants had been in the market. I said about 10 years. And he said, "You mean in 10 years, you've only penetrated 2% of the market?" And he looked at me and he said, "That's not potential, that's a problem." And as you can tell, he didn't invest. Now, this was a situation where within a year, the business had more than doubled in value after this investment. So he passed on this investment. We went from being valued at about $150 million to $300 million within the next 18 months. And within 6 years, that $150 million had grown to $2 to $3 billion. So it was an incredible opportunity that this particular investor just didn't understand. He had a problem with the way we were presenting things, and it prevented him from seeing the full opportunity. So don't let the potential problem guys get in your way. There's a wonderful potential out there for dental opportunity, and just keep plugging away, because you're going to get a lot of no's, a lot of dead silence before you get those very valuable yeses. So on that note, thank you very much. And I look forward to some Q&A at this point.
Great. Thank you so much to both Marty and Gene. I thought it was nice that there were some great parallels between the two talks, but also some different perspectives. So we have some questions in the chat already, but feel free to raise your hand if you have a question or topic you'd like to offer up for discussion live. Otherwise, feel free to place your questions in the chat or send them to me directly. And I'll start with one. So I think it was nice that we heard both Gene and Marty talk about the importance of thinking through your commercial model pretty early on, thinking through your marketing and your market data and your financial projections. But I think for our earlier stage teams, it's often challenging to figure out the right altitude for all of that, or the right timing for all of that. So starting with Gene, maybe, could you share a couple of those early pieces of the commercial model that stand out to you when you hear early stage teams presenting that make you go, "Oh, this team really knows what they're talking about"?
So yeah, thanks, Andrew. When you are looking at bringing, you have these products, these technologies you want to bring to market, you're focused on the clinical need. That's where you're starting, and you hope that you're doing something, or you're expecting to do something for the patient. But how are you going to get it to the patient? And so, is your product that you're creating, is it something that will be used primarily by a specialist or a general dentist? Is it something that you believe will require education and training? And I think I'm pretty sure Marty mentioned this in his slides. And how are you going to train and educate those dentists? And then how will you physically get it into their hands? Will this be something that you will need to build an infrastructure to work with, or will you work with a dental dealer, or will you partner or license to a dental company, and they will be your distribution and sales partner? But definitely you have to figure out how to get it into the hands of the clinician and give them the education. And without those two things, you don't have much. So people will be would like to hear your thoughts on that.
Great. And how about you, Marty? What are some of those things that our earlier stage teams that are maybe just starting to raise their first capital could do to show that they're starting to think through their commercial model and that their financial projections and detailed market assessments are not just smoke and mirrors?
Yeah, I think I always look for analogous situations. I go, who out there is already doing something like that? So if you can latch on to an existing sales and marketing structure, if there's already some channel, some access, because again, it's so difficult to get the attention and get in front of the dentist. It's hard. I look at the dental implant world today. I mean, how many dental implant companies are there out there? I asked that rhetorically, but I honestly am not sure how many are out there. It's a very large number, and oftentimes you go into the waiting room of a oral surgeon or periodontist, and there's one patient and 4 dental implant sales reps all sitting there waiting to try to get in to see the dentist. It's a very, very difficult process to try to get that time in front of the dentist, and to think today that you're going to launch something new that puts another field sales organization out there. It just seems to me that there's a needless redundancy. If you can find partner companies that already have invested in that, they already have salespeople out there, and your product would fit within their product portfolio, it certainly makes the overall experience a more predictable one and reduces the expense that you would have to spend on developing your own sales organization. That said, the existing structures, they, if you will, they know where the bodies are buried. They know where the guys using large amounts of products that could be similar to yours are. They know where those practices are. They already have that initial experience. And it certainly is more efficient to find a partner that has that knowledge already and can target those customers more effectively based upon the attributes of your particular product.
Great. And another thing that you talked about, Marty, was that changing behavior, especially in dentistry, is expensive and time consuming.
Yes.
But a lot of these innovative ideas that our teams are developing require that change of behavior because they're new, innovative, regenerative medicine products.
Right.
What are a few other companies that come to mind that have balanced that innovation and change of behavior requirement well, that we might be able to learn from?
Yeah, I think if, let's start, I guess, with the home run. I mean, if you look at what Align Technologies did in the orthodontic space, and you look at what the market looked like before they started and what it looks like today. I mean, effectively, orthodontics was done strictly by orthodontists, minimally by general practitioners. It was incredibly complex for a GP to try to learn how to do it, and even ordering the right parts and pieces out of a very complex orthodontic catalog was extremely difficult. So on the education side, you can look at that a few different ways. I look at what Align did was, on one hand, they developed a clear aligner, which the product itself was innovative and unique and certainly very different. But what they also did was they made it extremely easy for their target audience, the general practitioner, to use the product. All a general practitioner had to do to become an orthodontist was effectively pull an impression and send it to Align Technology. Align built the infrastructure then to receive the impression and to treatment plan the case, to get back to the dentist with the treatment plan, have the dentist approve it, and then fabricate the clear aligners and send them back to the GP so that they could offer orthodontic services to their patients. Now, the other kind of the third leg of the stool for Align was also that they did a very aggressive direct-to-consumer advertising campaign. So they were also delivering patients to the GP, and for a long, long time, that was one of the key elements of it. But if you set that aside, because most dental companies don't have the wherewithal to afford that, but what they did was they actually involved themselves in treatment planning and made it extremely easy for the dentist to access their technology, by understanding that if they didn't do that and they didn't develop that service side of the business, that it would make it very difficult for the product to be successful. And I think sometimes you got to think it through that way, is what are the obstacles to adoption? What would make it easier for the dentist to incorporate my product into their treatment planning? And what can I do to make that easier for them and assist them in adoption?
And how about you, Gene? What are some good examples of companies that have overcome change of behavior challenges that we might be able to learn from?
Well, I think Marty hit it on the head. The one that stands out is just redefining the industry is Align, and they made it simpler and easier for a general dentist to provide orthodontic care for patients. And they thought about it from the perspective of, how do you get a general dentist to even engage in treatment of orthodontics? And so they provide a back end that really takes all the decisions for the general dentist. I think some of the things that happened at Dentsply Sirona with CEREC, with in-office milled crowns, which accelerates the treatment process. It takes a crown appointment down to one visit, are very interesting. That was also a change of behavior, a significant change of behavior, and a change in how a dentist runs a practice. Again, also like Invisalign, a long runway of investment in building the infrastructure to support that.
All right. Any live questions before we get to a few of the questions that have come through in the chat? So we have a question from the audience about any tips to keep larger dental companies engaged when they show interest, but say, great product, great idea, but we'd only be interested in partnering or investing once you obtain FDA approval.
I'll jump in first on that one. I think the best thing is to find who their key opinion leaders are out in the market. So obviously there are going to be certain dentists that are closely associated with certain companies. Typically it's not too difficult to find out who they are, or even just look at who's lecturing at a given scientific program, convention, whatever it might be, annual meeting, and then get those dentists to be champions of your product so that they're the ones taking the message to the potential partner company. They not only hear it from you and get the message direct from the company, but you start to kind of flank them by bringing the message in from other places that they may see as more credible. Even salespeople, marketing people within an organization, you can get them excited and they become champions. You really need to create or find a champion within a large dental organization if you want that message to kind of hang around for a while. And those champions can be clinical from the field, they can be clinical dentists, they can be from internally within the company, but you just have to keep working the room until you find someone to carry that message forward.
Yeah, what I would add to that, Marty's spot on. You have to find that internal advocate, whether it's in the clinical group or a marketing person, someone who has a stake in what it is you're developing. And the other thing is, do not stop communicating. Meet that person as frequently and as often as you can, and let them know of your progress. You want them to become your advocate. So,
and things change within dental companies all the time. I mean, a product that may not have seemed too attractive 1 month could suddenly, due to some change, become a very attractive product 3, 4, 5 months later too. So you just have to keep to stay with it, be persistent.
Great. All right. It looks like a question from Gene.
Hello, wonderful job, both of you. I have a question about the story. You both talked about the importance of telling a story, and I think that's a really good thing to reinforce for everybody. And of course, it's best if that story has a happy ending, and you start kind of, as you said, I think, Marty, right to left with that happy ending and work backwards.
Right.
But I'd like you both to talk about whether it's more compelling to tell a story about building a company to last and what that would look like, or building a company to exit when you're talking to investors who are obviously ultimately interested in getting a piece of that exit action. So can you talk a little bit about building to last versus building to exit?
Ooh, that's a tough one, Jeannie, because the investors are clearly looking at the exit. They want to know where that is, but part of that exit is selling it to someone else who wants it to last. And so what you're really doing is you're building something to last, and that is your exit strategy. Is you have something that's built to last that you want someone else to take on. So
Yeah, I mean, I think to Gene's point, I think you always tell yourself, I'm going to build this to last. I mean, that's the basic idea, that your business plan is to have a long-term growth projection and to build a viable, long-lasting product entity, whatever it might be. And then I would always then say, but wait, look at all these situations that have occurred where companies have been acquired or gone public, or so that there were transactional opportunities along the way that, based upon success, could always happen. And I always found it important in presentations to be able to point to something that had already happened, that, hey, here's a similar product that had been launched under similar circumstances, addressing a similar market, and it was a success. And if your story is too unique and you really can't point to something that's happened in a similar way at some point, then I think it's just harder to get investors to buy in. But if you can, hey, we developed an innovative dental implant and we were able to reach 15 or 20 million in sales, and then, wow, lo and behold, someone came by and said, we want to acquire you. And we said, oh, wonderful. Well, there was a nice exit there. And everybody that invested to get us to that point was really, really happy. And then the company that bought us, well, 2-3 years later, somebody wanted to buy us from them. And hey, they were really happy because they got their money back plus a multiple. But the whole concept was, if you keep doing good things and you've got a great product and you've got great customer relations and you're focusing on meeting and exceeding the needs of your customers, then good things happen along the way. And here's an example of how that happens. And it happens in dental all the time. I mean, we talked a little bit about this early in the week, is that dental companies have a very small percentage of their expense budget in R&D. They don't typically develop internally new products and ideas. R&D in dental is mostly D, it's development. It take what they already have and they're retweaking it or doing this and that. They do rely on outside ideas and concepts that they acquire, that they license, whatever they do. That's really where a lot of the research aspect comes from in the dental world. So they're on the lookout for stuff all the time. They know they don't have the money and the wherewithal to do it internally. So they're looking for external ideas, innovation to bring into their product portfolio.
Great. And Gene had to step out to another commitment. So spotlight's on you now, Marty.
Okay.
And I'll go to another question from the audience. And I feel like this is really important given how few investors there are with dental experience. How do you balance managing expectations of investors for a quick exit, quick clinical adoption, with the fact that it'll often always take more time and money than you expect? And also, I think, more time and money in dental than other types of med tech.
Yeah, again, I think that's that whole manage expectations from the beginning standpoint, that you want to make sure you've got a good relationship. I mean, as I think we talk about the VC type level of investment, it's just so critical that they understand the situation, that they are really investing in the opportunity and the team, and that they're understanding enough to go, hey, if this does take a little longer, if there are some twists and turns, we believe in this and we're going to stay with it. If that isn't the kind of mentality, then you probably have the wrong investor. I mean, not that their money isn't good, but you just hate to be in a situation where the expectations and the reality becomes so far apart that things get contentious. Recently, I always try to point to examples of how things can kind of get a little squirrely if you don't watch yourself. company just went public in dental called Sonendo. It's a medical device or a dental device company that is brought a disruptive way of treating endodontic root canals, et cetera. And they, based on their FTC filing or their SEC filing, have raised about $285 million to fund the product to date. And they felt it was required that they then take the company public, which everybody looks at going public as being a nice exit strategy. But in this case, because so few people really know dental in the public markets, I think IPOs can be very risky unless you really just have a great handle on the business. It's very successful. A lot of the uncertainty has already been overcome. But Sonendo went out at around $12 a share, market cap approaching the 285 that was already paid in. Now, 6, 7, 8 months later, they're trading at around 3, and the market capitalization is down to about 75, 80 million. And I just don't think they ever managed the expectations of the investors. All along the way, they kept having to go back and ask for more and more money because they underestimated how long it would take them to get to market and the challenges in changing behavior in the endodontic space. And it's just a cautionary tale. I think you got to be really careful, kind of careful what you wish for. I'm sure everybody thought an IPO would be a wonderful thing and let's all, stand up and cheer. And yet here they are 6, 7 months later with a business worth about, 1/4, 1/3 of what the paid in capital is, which I'm sure isn't where they wanted to be. So I think you just really want to get to know the people that are investing in you and make sure that they fully understand that there's nothing left to chance there about what they're thinking and how you're presenting things and exactly what they think the future will hold.
Okay, great. One other question from the audience, and it's about, I think one of the dreaded responses from investors is that you're a little too early for us, right? How do you overcome that, especially for our teams that are maybe just starting to move from their angels and friends and families to that first price round, getting that first or that lead venture capital investor on board?
Well, I mean, I think you got to take them at their word. And then again, my experience is friends and family and angels can be networks unto themselves. Sometimes you just need to start asking, take that message back to that initial group. Kind of the good news is the venture guy didn't come in and take 80% of the company and dilute us all down to dust. So the good news is you go back to the group of either angels or friends and family and say, hey, we're going to have to expand this network a bit. We need to raise more money at this level to move the development along so that we have a more compelling story to talk to the VCs or the next level of investors. And the longer you can kind of keep that going, and I'm not saying it's not hard work. I'm in a current situation where that's exactly what we've done. We've effectively, and a lot of the mistakes that I speak to or the points I try to make here are based upon mistakes I've seen in this business. I wasn't there from the beginning, but I came in at a point where things were pretty messy. But we've been able to successfully continue to go back to friends and family and continue to get the funding we needed to keep checking boxes as we went forward, so that the message to the friends and family was, we're not having to take that huge haircut. We're not having to be devalued and diluted by having someone come in when we're in a less than fully developed or strong state. And can I count on you to keep funding this for a while so that we can continue to get further along, so that we don't have to go through that dilution? And the message resonates. Some of the guys, they get it and they step in, and we've been able to go back to some of the friends and family investors for 2, 3, 4 rounds of investing because they wanted to protect their ownership percentage and they didn't want to see drastic dilution.
And I think one of the things that I took away from your talk was just what an iterative process this is, learning what the weaknesses are in your commercial model or just the parts of your story that aren't coming through, and going back and checking those boxes that came up and getting out there and pitching again or changing your fundraising strategy.
I mean, after every single presentation, you're going to learn something. I mean, somebody's going to ask you a question that you might not have heard before, and you just want to go back and take it seriously and decide whether you need to make a change or not. I mean, I think the downside in having a whole lot of friends and family involved is it almost becomes a full-time job trying to manage your shareholders and keep all that kind of orderly if you get up to 30, 40, 50 friends and family that are in the mix. The other, I think, again, if you can develop colleagues from the dental profession and have 10, 15, 20 dentists that are invested in your business as well, it just goes, especially at the very early stage, it goes a long way to establishing credibility going forward too, to point to the fact that it's a dental product. And look, I've got 20 dentists that have invested their own money. And if that number continues to expand as you need more funding, it's never a bad thing. That wins on a couple fronts.
And you've got your first customers already lined up, right?
Hopefully, that's right. That is the key. Yep, that doesn't hurt at all. Well, and again, even if you've got prototype, it's always easy then if you've got them as investors as well to go ahead and get their clinical input as you go through the process.
Great, great. So one last question from the audience, and we have quite a few teams that are addressing pretty small patient populations, but patient populations that have really significant unmet clinical needs.
Right.
Is there anything that you learn from your work in the PMJ space that these teams might be able to build into their story about how to make these opportunities in smaller patient populations appealing to different investors?
Yeah, I think that really is where partnering becomes so critical, is to try to find a company that is addressing needs of that patient population in some way, maybe not specific to your product, but maybe those patients have other needs that have products that are being sold through them or to the patient, the medical professionals that treat them. Sometimes there may be a dental component, but there's a broader medical issue, and the medical path is a better path to direct the product through. At Noble Biocare, we had, for a long time, we sold a line of maxillofacial reconstructive implants that were used for oncology patients to reconstruct facial features, facial prosthetics, and attach them. I mean, a huge need. And I visited a number of clinics, and you'd see these patients being treated. It was really amazing how well their appearance could be reconstructed. And you talk to oral maxillofacial surgeons, and they'd always want to talk about that product. Unfortunately, there was no real commercial volume in the product. It just hardly anybody was really buying much of it at all. And we eventually had to go through and find a medical maxillofacial plating company, and they were able to then add these products in as a component of a broader product line, more products that were typically sold to hospitals, not necessarily being sold to dentists. So it was trying to find that fit with another partner that already had the investment and the attention of a certain market segment, and then being able to say, this is a nice complement to the existing structure, and it doesn't require an entirely new focus or doesn't distract maybe a dental company from doing what they're already doing. It just seemed to be marrying up the delivery, the medical dental professional, the patient, and then what are they buying a lot of, and how can I partner up with a company that's already doing business in that space? Because the niche ones are, there's usually a huge need, and it's always so gratifying to see some of these incredible cases and the way patients can respond and benefit from the treatment. But if it happens, once every 6 months, it's just really difficult to build a commercial model around that.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Marty, for sharing so many of your experiences and some great advice with the teams here.
You're welcome.
And thank you to Gene as well, who has stepped out. I hope you'll stay in touch with the Resource Center. Is there a good way for teams that might be interested in some more specific questions to get in touch with you?
I'd say, Jeannie and Francine we've known each other for a little while. So I think if there's any follow on and you want to route through them, or I'm happy to go ahead and forward my my email contact to everyone on the team. But I'll my handlers for this group are Jeannie and Francine. They do a pretty good job of keeping me under control. A lot of times they put me in front of a group and it's a disaster. But I think in this case it came off okay. Hope I behaved myself.
Good boy. Good boy.
Moms. Okay.
Thank you so much for being so generous with your time, and I'll turn it
My
over to Mitsumi for the logistics on our break and next session.